A gravel road in southeastern Iowa, mid-July. The sun pressing down on a county nobody from the city has ever heard of. A two-story farmhouse sits at the end of a dirt track. White clapboard gone gray. Wisteria swallowing the south wall. The chickens in the yard scratch like the place still belongs to them. Maybe it does. Inside, at the end of a narrow hallway, there is a door. Oak. Thick. Unpainted. A skeleton key lock. Cool to the touch even in the summer heat. The other doors in the house are pine. Painted white. Plain. This one is something else. Something a man built himself after the house was already standing because he needed it for something the house had not been built for. Nobody has opened that door in 10 years. A suitcase hits the dust at the bottom of the front steps. A girl 17 years old picks it up. I'll write the complete corrected story in one continuous piece, with the soldier reference removed and minor refinements throughout. The suitcase hit the dirt first, then the duffel bag, then the plastic grocery sacks. 1, 2, 3. Tossed out the upstairs window like she was emptying a drawer of things she'd been meaning to throw out for years. Hannah Galloway stood in the middle of the gravel road. 17 years old. Cotton blouse damp at the collar from the July heat. And she watched her whole life land in the dust at her feet without saying a word. Because what was there to say? The curtain in the window moved. Just once. The lace one Lorraine had sewn herself the summer before Hannah's daddy died. The one Lorraine still ironed every other Sunday like it meant something. The curtain moved, then it didn't. Then the window slid shut so quiet you almost missed it. And that was that. The plate did it. Just a white plate. From the dish drainer. Hannah had washed it, dried it, set it back in the cabinet above the refrigerator, the way she'd done 1,000 times since she was tall enough to reach. Except this time Lorraine came in, picked it up, held it to the light, and said, "There's a spot." There wasn't, but there didn't need to be. There was a spot the way there'd been a spot for 13 years. A spot on Hannah. A spot on the bedspread. A spot on the way she chewed her toast. A spot Lorraine had been working her thumb against since the funeral, trying to rub it out, and never could. So now the spot was on the gravel road, with everything she owned. Hannah didn't cry. That part was important. Not because she was tough, because she was empty. There's a difference. Tough people have something left to lose. Empty people just stand there and look at the suitcase and think about whether the latch is still gonna work after that fall. She bent down, snapped the latch open. It worked. Of course it worked. Things made in 1958 worked. That was the thing about old things. They held together. They held together long after the people who bought them stopped holding together at all. She looked through the suitcase. 3 changes of clothes. A pair of canvas tennis shoes with a hole in the right toe. A toothbrush. A hairbrush her mama, her real mama, the one she'd never met, was supposed to have left somewhere. Though Hannah had no proof of that, only the wish. A spiral notebook with the corners bent. And a tin. A tin that used to hold Domino brown sugar. Now it held $42. $42. In ones. In fives. 110 she'd been saving since Easter from babysitting the Hartley twins. 2 quarters. A nickel. $42 was everything that stood between Hannah Galloway and the rest of her life. She sat down right there in the gravel, counted it again, like the number was gonna change if she pushed it hard enough, like maybe she'd missed a 5. She hadn't. 42. She put the tin in the bottom of the suitcase under the clothes, the way her grandma had taught her when she was 7, before her grandma went off to the home in Cedar Rapids and stopped recognizing her face. Hide your money where you'd never look for it, sugar. Then no one else will either. Hannah closed the suitcase, stood up, brushed the dust off the back of her shorts, and looked at the road. To her left, the town. 3 miles back, a square, a diner, a post office. People who knew her as the Galloway girl, the one Lorraine raised after Silas passed. People who'd already made up their minds about her years ago and hadn't bothered to update the file since. To her right, the road kept going, out past the silos, past the Larson place and the McAllister place, out into country she'd ridden through on the school bus but never stopped in. Country where nobody knew her name yet. Country where the only person she'd be expected to be was whoever she decided to be that morning. She picked up the suitcase. She picked up the duffel. She picked up the plastic sacks. 1, 2, 3. And she turned right, because going left was just the slow way to dying. The sun was the kind of sun that didn't care about you. That's the only way to describe an Iowa July. It didn't care. It sat up there in a sky so blue it looked painted, and it pressed down on the top of your head like a hand belonging to somebody who'd never met you but had already decided you didn't deserve shade. Hannah walked. She passed the Larson mailbox, the McAllister mailbox, a field of corn so tall it whispered when the wind passed through and so empty of people you could have screamed and nobody would have come. She didn't scream. She walked. The plastic sacks cut into her fingers. She switched hands. Switched back. She thought about her daddy. She tried not to think about her daddy. He'd been a quiet man. That's what she remembered. Quiet. Tall. Hands that smelled like motor oil and Old Spice. He'd lifted her up to look at the moon once when she was 3 on the porch of the house Lorraine had since repainted twice to make sure no trace of him remained. And he'd said something to her about the moon and she couldn't remember the words, just the smell. Oil and Old Spice. And the way the moon had been so close she'd thought she could touch it. Then he was gone. A tractor turned over on him in the spring of 1960. They'd told her later when she was old enough. Some piece of equipment that should have been replaced 6 months earlier. But Silas Galloway wasn't the kind of man who replaced what he could fix. He fixed it. And then the fix didn't hold. And he was 26 years old. And she was 4. And Lorraine kept her. For appearances. Because that's what people did in 1960 in towns like theirs. They kept the dead man's child, even when the dead man's child wasn't theirs. Especially when it wasn't theirs. They kept her, and they fed her, and they bought her school clothes, and they made very sure she understood in every silence at every dinner table. That kept was the operative word. Hannah walked. The sun moved. And then she saw the sign. It was nailed to a fence post sideways, like the person who'd put it there hadn't cared whether anybody read it or not. The paint was sun-faded. The wood was warped. But the letters were still there. Farmstead for sale. Ask Earl at the general store. Hannah stopped. She looked at the sign. She looked at what was past the sign. A gate, half open, held together with baling wire. Past the gate, a track of beaten-down grass running between two rows of overgrown hedge, disappearing down toward a stand of cottonwoods. And past the cottonwoods, just barely visible, a roof, slate gray, tilted. The kind of roof that had been losing the argument with gravity for a long, long time. She stood there for a minute. Just a minute. A crow called somewhere out in the corn. She picked up her suitcase, and she walked back toward town. Earl Hodges had been behind the counter of the Hodges General Store since before Hannah was born, before Lorraine was born, before, by some accounts, the store itself was built. Though that part was probably an exaggeration, his nephew started in 1962, and Earl had never bothered to correct. He was 64, round, bald on top, with the kind of mustache that had stopped being fashionable in 1948 and was making a quiet comeback among men who didn't care about fashion. He wore a denim apron over a blue work shirt. He kept a transistor radio under the counter tuned to KMA Shenandoah for the weather, and a roll of butterscotch candies in a glass jar by the register that he handed out free to children widows and anybody who looked like they needed one. When the bell over the door jingled at 2:47 that Tuesday afternoon, Earl looked up, and he saw a girl, 17 maybe. Sweat on her forehead, dust on her shoes, carrying everything she owned in 3 sacks and a beat-up suitcase. The kind of girl who walked into his store maybe twice in his career, and never for a good reason. "Help you," Earl said. "The sign," Hannah said. "On the fence, out past the McAllister place." Earl set down the inventory sheet he'd been pretending to read. "The Mercer place," he said. "It's for sale. It's been for sale." "How long?" Earl scratched his chin. 3 years. Nobody bought it. Nobody wanted it. Hannah set her sacks down by the door. She walked to the counter. She put her hands flat on the wood the way she'd seen men do when they were about to ask for something they didn't expect to get. "How much?" she said. Earl looked at her, long. "Honey," he said, "that place isn't for somebody like you." "How much?" Earl sighed. He reached under the counter, pulled out a manila folder, opened it, closed it, opened it again. "It's complicated," he said. "Tell me." "Walter Mercer died 3 years ago. No will that we ever found. No next of kin we could locate. Place got tied up with the county. I'm the trustee on the paperwork because nobody else volunteered." He paused. "Transfer fee is $40. That's what it'd cost you to put it in your name." 40. 40. But Hannah, she didn't react to her name. He'd known her since she was small. Of course he had. This was that kind of town. Everybody knew her name. That was half the reason she was leaving. "Hannah, there's no power that works. The well needs a new pump. There's a hole in the roof you could throw a cat through. There's a room in there nobody's been in since Walter died, and probably nobody should." He stopped, realized he'd said too much, started again. "It's not livable. It's barely standing. I wouldn't sell it to my own daughter. You don't have a daughter. That's not the point. I have $42, Hannah said. Earl went still. The transistor radio under the counter was playing something tinny. A weather update. Chance of thunderstorms after sundown. He looked at her. She looked at him. There wasn't any begging on her face. That was what got him later when he thought about it. There wasn't any begging and there wasn't any fear. There was just a girl who'd done the math. Earl, she said, I have $42 and nowhere to sleep tonight, and you have a place nobody wants. We can help each other, or we can both pretend we don't see what we're seeing. Earl put a hand over his mouth. He stood there for a long time. Then he turned around, opened a drawer behind him, and took out a key on a brass tag. He laid it on the counter. He pushed the paperwork across. Sign here, he said, and here, and here. She signed. Her handwriting was small, even. The hand of a girl who'd practiced her signature in a notebook because she'd known somehow that one day she was gonna need it. Earl took the 40, counted it twice, slipped it into the cash drawer like he wished he could put it back in her pocket. He pushed the key toward her. There's another key, he said, for the back door. I don't know where it is. Okay. And there's a room in there. You said it's locked. Okay. I never had a key to it. Nobody did. Walter. He stopped. Just leave it alone, honey. Whatever's in there's been in there a long time. Some doors don't want to be opened. Hannah picked up the key, closed her fist around it. The brass was warm. Mr. Hodges, she said. Yeah. I'd like a box of saltines, a jar of peanut butter, and a box of matches, if you'll take the $2. Earl Hodges, who had stood behind that counter for 41 years and had seen 1,000 kinds of trouble walk through his door, took off his glasses. He wiped them with the corner of his denim apron. He put them back on. I'll take $1, he said. 2. 1. Mr. Hodges. 1 Hannah. That's the price. And there's a roll of butterscotch in the jar there. Take that too. I won't have you walking out of here with nothing but crackers. She took the butterscotch. She didn't say thank you. He didn't expect her to. The bell jingled when she opened the door. The sun outside was lower now, the shadows of the corn longer. The radio behind the counter said, "Thunderstorms, definitely thunderstorms by 10. Earl watched her walk out into the heat with everything she had, and he didn't know it yet. Couldn't have known. But he was going to lie awake that night thinking about that key, and the room nobody had been in, and the girl who'd just signed her name to it. The track from the gate to the house was longer than it looked. Hannah hadn't expected that. From the road, you could see the roof through the trees and think it wasn't more than a stone's throw. But the track wound. It wound around an old rock pile. It wound past a fence that had given up sometime during the Eisenhower administration. It wound down into a little gully where a creek ran shallow over white pebbles. And then it wound back up, and only then did the house come into view all at once. She stopped, because the house didn't look the way she'd pictured it. She'd pictured a shack, something fallen in. The kind of place you wouldn't put your dog in. And it was that the roof was sagging and the porch was tilted, and the wisteria had crawled up the south wall and was working on the windows like it intended to swallow the whole thing whole. But it was something else, too. It was a real house, a real true farmhouse, 2 stories. White clabbered gray now from weather. A wide porch wrapping the front and one side. A brick chimney still standing straight. A barn off to the right, smaller than the house, with the doors hanging open, and one hinge giving up. A hen house off to the left. An old orchard down the slope behind fruit trees gone wild but still in leaf. And chickens. Hannah counted them before she even set down her sacks. 7. 7 scrawny brown hens scratching in the yard like they owned the place, which Hannah supposed they did. They'd been here longer than anybody else. She set down the suitcase. The hens looked up. One of them, a Rhode Island red gone scruffy, cocked her head at Hannah like a question. "Hi," Hannah said. The hen didn't answer, but she didn't run either. Hannah climbed the porch steps. The wood gave under her weight a little. Not broken, just tired. The way old wood gets tired when nobody's walked on it in a long while. The front door was unlocked. It wasn't that anybody had left it open. It was that the door had swelled in the frame, and the latch didn't catch anymore. She pushed it. It scraped against the floor. It opened. The smell that came out was the smell of a closed house. Wood. Dust. Something like cedar from a closet somewhere. Mouse. A little. Not bad. The kind of smell you'd expect from a place that had been sealed up but not abandoned in spirit. Sealed up like a wound that's healing. She stepped inside. The front room had a stone fireplace. A rag rug bunched up in the middle faded. A horsehair sofa that nobody had sat on in years with a quilt folded across the back that was the colors of a faded sunset. A rocking chair by the window. An oil lamp on a side table. A pump organ against the far wall with the keys yellowed. Hannah stood in the middle of the room. She felt the way you feel when you walk into a house where somebody's just left. Not died. Just left. Stepped out for a minute. Set down the coffee cup. Said I'll be right back to nobody in particular. And didn't come back. She walked through the front room to the dining room table. 6 chairs, lace tablecloth so old it crumbled where she touched it. Through to the kitchen wood stove, black with rust, sink with a hand pump cabinet doors hanging open. Showing a few tin plates, a coffee can on the windowsill with a dried geranium in it. Through the kitchen to a back porch washtub on a stand clothesline, the well outside the screen door. Back through the dining room. Up the stairs. 2 bedrooms upstairs, each with an iron bed frame, each with a thin mattress that needed airing, each with a wardrobe whose door drifted open if you so much as breathed near it. Back down. And then at the end of the downstairs hallway, the door. Hannah stopped, because she had walked past it once already and not noticed. Which was the strange thing. It was a door. Just a door. Except it wasn't. The other doors in the house were pine. Painted white. Plain. The kind of doors a country carpenter put in 50 years ago and never thought about again. This door was oak. Thick. Unpainted. The kind of door you put on a strong room. The kind of door a man put in himself after the house was already built. because he needed it for something the house hadn't been built for. The hinges were iron, black, hand-forged. The knob was iron too, and below the knob, a keyhole. Old, skeleton key style, worn smooth in the middle where a thumb had pressed against it many times. Hannah set her hand on the wood. It was cool. Cooler than the rest of the wall, which didn't make any sense. The hallway was the warmest part of the house. The sun came in the back window all afternoon. The wood paneling was warm to the touch. The floorboards were warm under her feet. But the door was cool. She tried the knob. It didn't turn. Of course it didn't turn. She tried it again, pushed her shoulder against the wood. The door didn't even creak. It was solid, set in its frame like it had grown there. She stepped back. She looked at it. She thought Earl said there was a room. She thought Earl said, "Leave it alone." She thought, "I am 17 years old, and I just bought this house for $40, and there is exactly one door in it that I cannot open." And of course there is. Of course there is. She turned around, walked back to the front room, picked up her suitcase, carried it to the smaller of the two bedrooms upstairs, the one with the window that faced east, because she wanted to know where the sun was coming from in the morning. Set her things on the floor, and then she came back down and stood in front of the door again. She didn't know why. She just stood there, and she had the very faint, very stupid feeling, the kind of feeling you can't say out loud without sounding crazy, that the door had been waiting for her. She shook it off. She went to make supper. There wasn't much to make. Hannah took the box of saltines and the jar of peanut butter and sat on the porch steps as the light slid down behind the cottonwoods. She ate the crackers slow. She'd learned a long time ago not to eat fast. Fast eaters ate too much. Slow eaters made food last. The chickens came over to investigate. She broke a cracker, tossed pieces into the dust. They came running, pecked at her feet. The Rhode Island Red got bold and stepped right onto her foot to get at a crumb. Hannah smiled. It surprised her. She hadn't smiled, and she didn't actually know. Long enough that the muscles in her cheeks felt unfamiliar, like a key turning in a lock that hadn't been used in a while. The sun went down. The sky did the thing it does in Iowa in July, went orange, went pink, went a long, slow purple. And then the first star came out, and then 1,000 more came out behind it. And the whole bowl of the sky was lit up like nothing she'd ever seen from Lorraine's backyard, where the streetlight at the corner of Elm and 3rd drowned everything out. She heard a coyote yip somewhere down by the creek. She heard the corn whisper. She heard a barn owl, maybe that ghost soft whoo. That doesn't sound like a bird at all. And she heard nothing else. Not a car. Not a TV. Not Lorraine's voice rising up the stairs about something Hannah had done or hadn't done or should have known better than to do. Nothing. It was the loudest nothing she'd ever heard. She brought her suitcase upstairs, pulled the thin mattress off the bed, and dragged it out the back door, and beat it with a broom she'd found leaning against the wood stove. Dust came out in clouds. She left it on the back porch to air. She came back inside, put the tin of money under a loose floorboard she'd noticed by the window, the way her grandma had taught her, where nobody would think to look. She washed her face at the kitchen pump, The water came up cold and clear. She'd been afraid it wouldn't. The well had held. The well had held, and the chickens were fed, and there was a roof most of one over her head. She lay down on the mattress on the back porch because it was too hot to sleep upstairs. She put her head on a folded sweater for a pillow. She stared at the stars through the screen, and she thought very clearly the first clear thought she'd had in a long time. I am alive, and I am here, and nobody can put me out tonight. She slept. She slept hard. Until the sound. It was around 3 in the morning. She didn't have a watch, but the moon was where the moon is at 3 in the morning in July, high up, small, washed out. The air had cooled. The corn had gone quiet. The sound came from inside the house. It wasn't a creak. A creak is wood settling. Hannah had grown up in an old house. She knew creaks. Creaks were friendly. Creaks were the bones of a house turning over in its sleep. This was different. It was heavier. Like something shifting. Like a chair sliding an inch across a wood floor. Like the way it sounded when Lorraine moved the kitchen table to mop under it. That kind of sound. But muffled. Behind a wall. Hannah opened her eyes. She didn't move. She listened. Nothing. Then again, that same sound. From the direction of the downstairs hallway. From the direction of the door. She sat up, slow. She thought mouse. She thought squirrel in the attic. She thought old house. Old house. Old house. But her heart was going faster than it should have. And she didn't get up because she didn't want to walk down that hallway in the dark to a door she couldn't open with nothing in her hand but a box of saltines. She lay back down. She listened. The sound didn't come again. After a long time, she slept. When she woke up, the sun was already over the eastern fence and the chickens were complaining about something. And Hannah Galloway was the owner of a farmstead in the rolling country of southeastern Iowa. And the first morning of the rest of her life had begun. She spent the morning learning the place. That's how she thought of it. Not exploring, learning. The way you learn a person. You start with the outside. You move careful. You don't pretend to know what you don't. The barn had a hayloft, and the loft had 3 bales left in it, dry and not too far gone that she could use for the chickens. A wheelbarrow with a flat tire. A handsaw rusted at the teeth but still a saw. A coil of baling wire. A bench with a vise. The hen house had 8 nesting boxes. 6 empty, too, with eggs in them. Old eggs she could tell by floating them in a pan of water from the well later, but useful information all the same. The orchard had 4 apple trees, 2 pear, 1 cherry that the birds had been making free with. The fruit wasn't ripe yet, but it was coming. End of summer, she'd have apples enough to do something with. If she was still here. She would be still here. She'd decided. There was a vegetable patch behind the hen house gone to weeds. But the soil under the weeds was black and crumbly and rich the way river bottom soil gets. There was a tomato vine that had volunteered along the south fence, 3 green tomatoes hanging on. She left them. They'd want another week. There was an outhouse which she had hoped against. There was no avoiding the outhouse. She came back inside around 11. The heat was building. and she stood in the kitchen and looked at the wood stove. The wood stove was where her real work was gonna start, because the wood stove was how she ate. The wood stove was how she boiled water. The wood stove was how eventually, when winter came, and winter was coming no matter how far away it felt right now, the wood stove was how she'd keep from freezing. She lit a fire. She had matches from Earl. She had kindling from a basket beside the stove that somebody, Walter Mercer, she supposed had left full and ready, the way a man leaves a thing he means to come back to. She had 3 split logs from a stack on the back porch. The fire took, slow at first. Then, with a confidence that surprised her, she set a pot of well water on to boil. And while she waited, she got down on her knees by the stove with a rag and started cleaning. It was the kind of cleaning you do when you're not really cleaning, when you're using your hands to keep your head still. She wiped the side of the stove, wiped under it, wiped the corner where the stove met the wall, behind the stove where the metal sat an inch off the wood paneling because the heat couldn't be allowed to touch the wood. And in that inch wedged in there, brown with old grease almost the same color as the wool, was a folded piece of paper. Hannah saw it, stopped. She set the rag down. She reached in, worked the paper free with 2 fingers. It was stiff. It had been there a long time. The grease and the heat had cured it almost like leather. She unfolded it, slow, careful. The paper crackled. The handwriting on it was small, tight, slanted to the right. The hand of somebody who'd been taught to write before the war, any war, take your pick. The kind of hand that didn't exist on people her own age. She read it. She read it again. Whoever finds this, God, bless you for having gotten this far. Don't open the room at the end of the hall. Not out of meanness. There are things that need time to be understood. When you're ready, the key is where tomorrow always begins. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. Hannah sat down right there on the kitchen floor, with her back against the wood stove that was now warm against her shoulder blades, with the pot of water just starting to murmur its way toward a boil, with the folded letter open in her lap. Where tomorrow always begins. She thought east, because tomorrow began in the east, where the sun came up. She thought that's the orchard. She thought, but there's nothing in the orchard but trees. Then she thought, not yet, and she didn't know why she thought that. But she did. She folded the letter, slid it into the pocket of her shorts. She got up. The water was boiling. She made herself a cup of weak coffee Earl had thrown in a spoonful of grounds in a twist of waxed paper. A kindness she hadn't yet finished registering, and she drank it, standing up at the kitchen window, looking out at the orchard. The apple trees stood quiet in the heat. Whatever was in the orchard could wait. Some things you don't run at. Some things you walk towards slow when you're ready. Edith Brennan showed up at 5 minutes past 2 that afternoon. Hannah was in the side yard repairing a section of fence with a length of baling wire and a pair of pliers she'd found in the barn, and she didn't hear the woman come up the track because the wind had picked up the way it does before an Iowa thunderstorm, and the cottonwoods were all talking at once. Hello, the house. Hannah's head came up. A woman was standing at the end of the track just past the gate. 40, maybe. Dark hair pinned back from her face with 2 tortoiseshell combs. A summer dress, pale blue sprigged with tiny white flowers, and a cardigan over it despite the heat. She carried a basket on one arm. Hannah set down the pliers. "Hi," she said. The woman didn't come any closer. That was the first thing Hannah noticed. Country people came up to your porch. Country people knocked on your door. Country people did not stand at the gate waiting to be invited, unless they weren't sure who they were going to find. "I'm Edith," the woman said. "I'm down the road, the next place east. About a half mile." Hannah. "Saw smoke from the chimney last night and again this morning. Didn't know anybody'd bought the Mercer place." "I did." "You did." It wasn't a question. It was the woman repeating it back to herself, like the words needed a second to fit together in her head. Hannah came over to the gate. Up close, Edith Brennan had kind eyes. That was the first thing about her. Brown, a little tired, but kind in the way of women who'd been kind so long they'd stopped knowing how not to be. She had a smudge of flour on her cheek. She hadn't noticed. "I brought you a few things," Edith said. She held up the basket. Cornbread, some chicken and dumplings, a jar of peach preserves. I figured if you just moved in, you probably hadn't had time to lay in much. You didn't have to do that." "I know. Thank you." Edith looked at her. For a second that lasted just a little too long. "How old are you, honey?" 17. 17. The woman closed her eyes for the briefest moment, like the number stung. Like the number explained something she'd been afraid was gonna need explaining. Then she opened her eyes and she smiled, and the smile was real, but it had a wobble in it. "Well," she said, I'll leave this by the gate here. I don't want to intrude. You're settling in. You'll have plenty to do without a neighbor underfoot." She set the basket down on the gatepost. "Mrs. Brennan," Hannah said. "Edith." "Edith. Did you know him, Mr. Mercer?" Edith's face did something. It wasn't dramatic. It was just, for half a second, the kindness slipped. And underneath the kindness was something else. Grief, maybe. Or the memory of grief. The way water under thin ice still moves even after the ice is set. "I knew Walter," she said. "Yes." "Was he good?" Edith looked at her, surprised. "Was he good?" Edith repeated. "Honey, Walter Mercer was as good a man as ever broke a plow on this stretch of road." "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering." "He was kind. He was quiet. He was sad the last few years. But he was good." "Yes." "Sad about what?" Edith hesitated. She looked at Hannah for a long moment. And Hannah saw her decide something. Saw her decide not yet. Saw the kindness come back over her face the way a curtain comes back over a window. "That's a long story," Edith said gently. "Not for the first afternoon." "All right. You'll come for supper some night. When you've got your feet under you. I'll tell you about Walter Mercer then, if you still want to hear it." "All right." Edith turned to go. Then she stopped. She turned back. "Honey," she said. What did you say your name was? Hannah. Hannah Galloway. The wind in the cottonwoods kept moving. The chickens kept scratching. The day kept doing what the day was doing. But Edith Brennan went still. It was a stillness Hannah had never seen on a grown woman's face before. The kind of stillness that happens when somebody has just heard something they've been waiting half their life to hear and didn't think they'd ever actually hear. The kind of stillness that means the floor has gone out from under them, and they are deciding very fast whether they are going to fall or not. Galloway, Edith said. Yes. With 2 L's. Yes. From town. From town. Edith put a hand on the gatepost. She steadied herself. She didn't say anything for what felt like a long time. The wind moved her cardigan. The basket sat there, with its checkered cloth turning back the corner in the breeze. Then Edith Brennan said, very quiet, almost to herself, "My Lord in heaven." "Mrs. Brennan." "Edith. It's Edith." "Edith. Are you all right?" The woman drew a breath, held it, let it out. She looked at Hannah, really looked at her this time. Looked at her the way a person looks at a photograph they can't quite place. Eyes traveling. Cheekbones, jaw, the set of the mouth, the curve of the brow. Cataloging. Confirming. Adding things up that didn't want to add up. "Honey, I have to go." "Did I? You didn't do anything. You didn't do anything." Edith pressed her palm flat against the gatepost. She turned. She took 2 steps back the way she'd come. Then she turned again. "Hannah." "Yes. You'll be all right tonight. Alone out here." "Yes. There's nothing in the house that scares you." It wasn't a question. It was a question pretending not to be a question. Hannah thought of the door. Hannah thought of the sound at 3 in the morning. Hannah thought of the letter folded in her pocket, and the words where tomorrow always begins, and the way Earl Hodges had said, "Leave it alone, honey." "No," Hannah said. "Nothing scares me." Edith Brennan looked at her one more time and nodded and walked away up the road without looking back. The basket stayed on the gatepost. The cornbread inside was still warm. Hannah stood at the gate for a long time after Edith was gone. The thunderstorm Earl's radio had promised was building now. The sky to the west had gone the color of an old bruise. The wind was picking the leaves up off the orchard floor and tossing them in slow circles. Somewhere far off there was that first low growl of thunder that didn't quite commit to being thunder yet. Hannah picked up the basket. She carried it inside. She set it on the kitchen table. She didn't open it. She walked down the hallway to the door. She stood in front of it. She put her hand on the wood. Cool. Always cool. And she said, not out loud, but in her head where it counted, "Who are you? Why does my name matter? What did Walter Mercer know about a girl named Galloway? What does Edith Brennan know that turned her face white as a sheet at a gate in July? What is on the other side of you?" The door didn't answer. Doors don't answer. But Hannah Galloway, 17 years old with $42 spent down to 2 and a tin in the floorboards and a fire in the wood stove, and a key from Earl on a brass tag in her pocket. Hannah Galloway understood. standing there in that hallway with the wind rising and the storm coming in, and a stranger's basket on her kitchen table, that she had not in fact bought a farm. She had bought a question, and the question had her name on it. And outside, the first heavy drops of rain hit the porch roof, and the cottonwoods bent and the chickens scurried for the henhouse. And somewhere across the orchard, a screen door slammed open in the wind, and Hannah Galloway turned away from the locked oak door at the end of the hall and went to face the storm. The room behind her stayed quiet. It had waited 10 years. It could wait one more night. The storm broke at 9. It came in the way Iowa storms come in. All at once, the wind first, then the sky cracking open in white sheets of light, then the rain. Hard, sideways, the kind of rain that didn't fall so much as get thrown. Hannah sat at the kitchen table with the oil lamp lit between her and the basket. The basket she still hadn't opened. She listened to the rain come at the windows. She listened to the wisteria slap the south wall. She listened to the chimney pull air down it in a long, low whistle that sounded almost like a voice. Almost. She thought the chickens. She thought the henhouse roof. She thought I should check. But she didn't get up, because there was a thing happening in her chest she didn't have a name for. A thing that had started when Edith Brennan said, "My Lord in heaven at the gate." A thing that had grown the way bread grows when you leave it in a warm kitchen. Slow, but steady, and bigger than you expected. A waiting. That was what it was. A waiting. For something she didn't yet know the shape of. The lamp guttered. She trimmed the wick. She finally opened the basket. Cornbread wrapped in cheesecloth, still warm against her hand. A small clay crock of chicken and dumplings, the lid sealed with a strip of cloth. A jar of peach preserves, the wax seal perfect. The label written in a careful, slanted hand. Brennan, July 1972. A year old. From last summer. And tucked at the bottom of the basket under all of it, a rosary. Wood beads. A small brass crucifix. A note pinned to the cord with a safety pin. "Honey, take this if you want it. It belonged to someone who I think would want you to have it. E.B." Hannah held the rosary in her palm. The beads were warm. The lamp flickered again. Outside, the thunder rolled down the long bowl of the valley, and somewhere across the corn, a tree came down with a crack, like a rifle shot. And Hannah Galloway sat very still at a kitchen table that wasn't hers, and held a stranger's rosary in her hand, and did not yet understand what it meant. But she understood that it meant something. She understood that Edith Brennan had walked half a mile in a coming thunderstorm, not to bring cornbread. She had walked half a mile to bring the beads. The rain kept up most of the night. Hannah moved her mattress off the back porch, set it up in the front room near the fireplace, slept in fits. Each time the thunder cracked close, she opened her eyes and looked at the hallway, at the dark mouth of it, at where she knew the door was, the cool oak door with the iron lock. She thought she heard it again around 4. The sound, the sliding sound. But the wind was loud and the house was old, and she couldn't be sure. She went back to sleep. When she woke up, the storm had passed. The world outside was dripping. The cottonwoods were bent. One of the apple trees had lost a limb. She could see it from the front window, a green branch lying like an arm in the wet grass. The chickens were already out picking through what the storm had brought up from the ground. Worms. The chickens loved worms. Hannah loved the chickens. She put on her shoes. She walked outside. The air after an Iowa storm is the cleanest air there is. Hannah stood on the porch and breathed it. Wet earth, wet wood, wet leaves. Something honey-sweet from the wisteria woken up by the rain. And the cool of it after the heat of yesterday, the cool that wouldn't last, but was for one morning a gift. She walked into the orchard. She wasn't planning to. Her feet just took her there, where tomorrow always begins. The east-facing side of the property, the 4 apple trees in a rough row, the 2 pears behind them, the cherry on its own at the end. The grass between them long and wet, soaking her ankles inside 2 steps. She walked between the apples. She didn't know what she was looking for. She walked past the first tree, past the second. The third was the biggest. Its trunk was thicker than the others. Its branches spread wider. An older tree, twice as old as Hannah maybe 3 times. She stopped at the base of it. There were roots coming up out of the soil. Roots that had pushed through the grass over the years and now lay on the surface like fingers. There was no other way to say it. Like long, crooked fingers stretching out from the trunk. Between 2 of the roots, a stone. Hannah stopped breathing because the stone was wrong. The orchard floor was Iowa dirt, black, crumbly, with the occasional small gray rock the size of an egg, the kind a glacier had dropped here 10,000 years ago and forgotten. This stone was bigger, smoother. One face of it had been worn down deliberately by hand until it was almost flat, almost square. Somebody had put it there, on purpose, to mark something. Hannah knelt in the wet grass, her knees soaked through inside a second. She didn't care. She set both hands on the stone. It was heavier than it looked. She had to rock it, then lift, then rock it again. It came up out of the soil with a small, wet, sucking sound, and underneath a shallow hole. In the hole a packet, wrapped in oilcloth, tied with twine. Hannah lifted it out, set it on her lap. The twine was wet. The oilcloth was cracked along the folds, but it held. Whatever was inside had been kept dry. She untied the knot. She unfolded the cloth. And inside the cloth, lying on a square of red velvet that had once been bright and was now the color of dried roses, a key, iron, black with age, but not rusted through. Skeleton key style. The bow at the top a simple loop. The bit at the bottom shaped to fit one specific lock and no other. The kind of key that had not been mass-produced. The kind of key that had been made by a man at a forge for a man with a particular door. Hannah held it on the flat of her palm. It was cold, like the door. She knelt there in the wet grass under the apple tree for what felt like a long time, holding the key, watching the morning sun come slanting through the orchard, watching the steam rise off the grass where the light hit it, watching a robin land on a branch above her and look down at her head cocked and then fly off. Then she stood up. She wrapped the key back in the oilcloth. She slipped it into her pocket, the same pocket that held the letter from behind the stove. She walked back to the house, slow, slower than she needed to, because she'd waited 2 days for this. And now that it was in her pocket, a part of her wanted to wait another 2. Wanted to put the key on the kitchen table and stare at it. Wanted to make herself ready. But ready wasn't a thing you could make yourself. Ready was a thing that happened to you while you were doing something else. So Hannah Galloway walked back to her house, up the porch steps, through the front room, down the hallway, to the door. She took out the key. She slid it into the lock. It fit. Of course it fit. She turned it. The lock resisted. The mechanism inside hadn't moved in years. She had to push harder. She had to throw her shoulder a little. Then, click. The sound was small, but it filled the hallway. It filled the house. It filled the morning. Hannah stood there with her hand on the iron knob. She thought I could still walk away. She thought I could put the key back under the stone. She thought no. I couldn't. And she turned the knob, and she pushed. The door opened. Not fast. Slow. The hinges groaned the way old iron groans when it has been holding its position for 10 years. The door swung inward, and the smell that came out wasn't bad. Wasn't the smell of mold or mouse or rot. It was the smell of something put away. Of cedar. Of dried lavender. Of paper. Of a thing somebody had taken the trouble to seal up so it would last. The smell of kept. Hannah stepped inside. The room was small, smaller than she'd pictured. About 10 feet by 12. A single window on the far wall, the curtain drawn, not nailed, not boarded, just drawn. A bed against one wall, narrow, a quilt folded perfectly across the foot of it, in patches of green and yellow and faded red. A small desk by the window. A chair tucked under the desk. A bookshelf on the wall opposite the bed. A braided rug on the floor, the colors gone soft. And on every wall, pictures, photographs in frames. A pressed wildflower under glass. A 4-H ribbon blue 3rd place. A school certificate. A hand-drawn sketch of a horse done in pencil, signed in the corner in a careful, schoolgirl hand. It was a girl's room. It was somebody's daughter's room. Hannah stood in the doorway and didn't go in for almost a minute, because going in felt like walking into a church. When she finally stepped onto the rug, the floorboard underneath gave a soft creak. That was not the creak of a strange house. It was the creak a floorboard makes under a person who stepped on it 1,000 times. The wood remembered. Hannah walked to the bookshelf first. She didn't know why. Maybe because books were the safest thing. Books didn't have eyes. Books didn't watch you read them. She ran a finger along the spines. Little Women. The cover blue worn at the corners. Anne of Green Gables. Pages dog-eared. A complete set of Nancy Drew. A King James Bible, brown leather, gold-edged pages. A copy of The Yearling. A high school yearbook. Hannah pulled this one out, looked at the cover. Hawkeye Consolidated Class of 1955. 19 Ma 55. She didn't open it, not yet. She set it back. She went to the desk. There was a single drawer. Hannah pulled it open. Inside, a stack of letters tied with a ribbon, a pencil cup with 3 pencils in it, and a fountain pen with the cap on tight. A school report card. A pressed maple leaf inside a folded piece of wax paper. And an envelope. Plain. White. Slightly yellowed. No address. No stamp. Just the word. Pictures written across the front in a man's blocky hand. Hannah lifted it out. She sat down on the bed. The quilt was soft under her. Somebody had loved this quilt. Somebody had washed it carefully, folded it the same way every time. She opened the envelope. Photographs slid out into her lap. 4 of them. The first one, a man, late 30s maybe, standing on the front porch of this house. The same porch. The wisteria smaller, just a few green tendrils starting up the post. He had his hands in the pockets of a pair of work pants. He wasn't smiling exactly, but he wasn't not smiling either. He had the face of a man who didn't believe in cameras but was tolerating one to humor whoever was holding it. Walter Mercer. Hannah didn't need to be told. She turned the picture over. On the back, in the same blocky hand that had written pictures on the envelope, Walter, May 1954. The second picture, a girl, sitting on the same roots Hannah had knelt at this morning, under the same apple tree, looking up at the camera with serious eyes and a small mouth and her hair in 2 braids over her shoulders. She wore a calico dress. Her feet were bare. She was maybe 16. Hannah turned this one over too. Marin, 16. Spring 1955. Marin. Hannah said the name out loud very quietly, just to feel it in her mouth. Marin. It was a strange name. Old country, maybe. Norwegian, the kind of name an Iowa farm girl might have inherited from a grandmother who'd come over on a boat. Hannah had never heard it before. But, Hannah looked at the picture again, looked at the eyes, the set of the mouth, the way the girl held her shoulders, and Hannah understood, without knowing how she understood, that she was looking at a face she'd been looking for her whole life without knowing it. She set the picture down on the quilt. She picked up the third picture. The third picture knocked the air out of her. It was a picture of 2 young people, a man and a woman, 20, 21 maybe, standing in this yard, in front of this house. The man had his arm around the woman's shoulders. The woman had her hand on the man's chest. Both of them were laughing, really laughing. The kind of laugh that doesn't pose for a camera. The kind of laugh that's caught. The woman was the girl from the second picture, older. Hair down now, falling loose around her face. A summer dress. A summer dress not so different, actually, from the one Edith Brennan had been wearing yesterday at the gate. The man. Hannah's hand went up to her mouth. The man was her father. She knew his face. She knew it from the wedding photograph Lorraine kept on the dresser in her bedroom. The one where Silas Galloway stood next to Lorraine in a borrowed suit and didn't quite meet the camera's eye. She knew it from the small frame picture Lorraine had on the bookshelf in the front room. Silas at 26, the last photograph anybody'd taken of him, holding a 4-year-old Hannah on his lap. with one hand and a coffee mug in the other. She knew this face, but she'd never seen it laughing. She'd never seen his face do that, open like that, free like that, with his head tipped back and his arm around a girl who wasn't Hannah's mother. Except Hannah's mother was Lorraine. Except Lorraine had married Silas Galloway in October of 1955. Lorraine had said so. Lorraine kept the dates straight. Lorraine had the marriage certificate framed on the wall in the den, where every guest who came over couldn't help seeing it the way Lorraine wanted. October 1955. Hannah turned the picture over. On the back, same blocky hand. Silas and Marin. June 1955. June. 4 months before October. 4 months before Silas Galloway married Lorraine. Hannah sat on the bed in a room that didn't belong to her and held a photograph that didn't belong to her, and looked at a face that did. Her father's face, laughing with somebody who wasn't Lorraine, in a yard that was today hers. She didn't move for a long time. She was aware of the sun coming through the window in a slanted yellow bar that fell across the foot of the bed. She was aware of a fly tapping at the glass. She was aware of her own breathing slower than it should have been. She was aware of the fourth picture still in her lap, unturned, unlooked at. She picked it up. The fourth picture was of a baby, 3 or 4 months old maybe, wrapped in a white blanket, eyes closed, sleeping. Held in a woman's arms, the arms were all you could see of the woman. The angle was wrong. Whoever had taken the picture had cut off the woman's face. Hannah turned it over. She came. February 1956. That was all. She came. Hannah Galloway had been born in March of 1956. Hannah set the 4 photographs down side by side on the quilt. Walter, Marin, Silas and Marin, the baby. She looked at them. She looked at them. She looked at them. And from somewhere very far away from inside herself, from a place she had not known had a voice. She heard a small, dry sound that turned out to be her own laugh. Not a happy laugh. The other kind. The kind that comes out when the universe shows you a magic trick you didn't ask to see. She said out loud to nobody, "Oh." Just that. Oh. Edith came back that afternoon. Hannah was on the front porch when she did, sitting on the top step. The photographs were inside on the kitchen table in a careful row. The room at the end of the hall was still open. Hannah had not closed it. She didn't think she could. She'd made coffee. She was drinking it. She was waiting. She didn't know who she was waiting for, except she knew. Edith came up the track on foot again. No basket this time, just her hands at her sides. The blue cardigan over a different dress, this one yellow. Her hair pinned the same way. Her eyes finding Hannah's the second she crested the rise. She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. She didn't ask. She just looked. Hannah looked back. "I opened it," Hannah said. Edith nodded. Once. Slow. "May I come up?" "Yes." Edith came up the porch steps. She sat down next to Hannah, not too close. The respectful distance, the distance of a person who has known how to sit next to grief without crowding it for a long time. They sat. The chickens picked at the yard. A meadowlark called somewhere out past the fence. Her name was Marin, Hannah said. Yes. She was Walter Mercer's daughter. Yes. She and my father, yes. Hannah turned her face away. She didn't cry. The empty thing in her chest was still there. The empty thing did not cry. It just sat inside her and absorbed information, the way dry ground absorbs rain. Greedy. Quiet. All at once. Tell me, Hannah said. Edith folded her hands in her lap. She didn't start right away. When she started, her voice was lower than it had been yesterday. The voice of a woman telling a story she told to herself 100 times in the privacy of her own kitchen and had never told to another soul. Your daddy and Marin grew up 4 miles apart on the same gravel road. They went to the same one-room schoolhouse till they were 13. They went to the consolidated high school over in town after that. They were in the same class, the class of 53. They graduated together. Were they from 16 on, honey? Yes. 16. 16. Edith looked out at the orchard. After graduation, your daddy stayed on his folks' place a year. Worked the back 40 for his daddy. Saved up. Marin stayed here helping Walter. Her mama had died when she was small, you understand. There'd been a baby brother, too. But he didn't make it past the diphtheria winter of 49. So it was just Walter and Marin after that. The two of them, out here, working this place. Hannah nodded. In the spring of 55, your daddy came over and asked Walter for Marin's hand. Walter said yes. They were going to be married that fall. October. They were going to live here. Walter was going to deed them the whole place. The two of them would work it. Have their children here, the way it was supposed to go. Edith stopped. She took a breath. Then she came up pregnant. Hannah was still. That part was a happy thing. They were going to be married anyway. It just moved the date up some was all. They were thinking about a summer wedding. Quick. Quiet. Nobody'd think much of it. People around here, they don't count months too careful when the kids are good kids. And then Lorraine. The name hung between them. Lorraine's family had the hardware store in town. Hodges Hardware, no relation to Earl, different family, married into the Galloways later. Anyway, Lorraine's people had money. Not big money. Town money. The kind of money that gets you a new dress every season and a Buick every 5 years. They were what passed for important in those days. And Lorraine, Edith hesitated. Lorraine wanted your daddy. Wanted him. Had wanted him since they were children, honey. She'd been waiting on him. And when she heard he was engaged to a farm girl out on the gravel well. Lorraine's mother was the kind of woman who didn't take well to losing. What did she do? She went and saw your daddy. Lorraine's mother. Yes, she drove out to the Galloway place one Sunday afternoon when your granddaddy and grandmama were at church and your daddy was alone fixing fence in the lower pasture. And she sat in her car at the end of the drive and waited for him to come up. And when he came up, she rolled the window down, and she told him a great many things. About Maren, about Walter, about what their life would look like married out here on 160 rough acres with nothing but each other to lean on. She told him he'd be poor all his life. She told him his children would be poor. She told him Maren was a sweet girl. But a sweet girl wasn't a future. And she told him that Lorraine's daddy would set him up in town. Front money, a house, a start, a real start. Hannah's hands were closed in her lap, tight, tighter. And he listened. He listened. He listened to her. He was 21, honey. He'd never been off the farm. He'd never owned a suit that fit. He'd never set foot in a bank to ask for anything. And here was a woman in a Buick offering him the moon. He took it. He took it. Hannah closed her eyes. How long after, she said. How long after did he? 3 months. He told Maren in July. They were married, your daddy and Lorraine, in October. The same October he was supposed to have married Maren. Same month. Same county. Same little courthouse. I don't think any one thing in this story was worse than that. What did Maren do? Edith was quiet. She had the baby. Me. You. Right here. Walter delivered you. Old Doc Hennessy couldn't get out. The roads were a sheet of ice. Walter had midwifed his own cows for 30 years, and his hands knew what to do. And you came out screaming, and Maren held you. And she said, Hannah, just like that. Right out. Hannah. She'd had the name picked. Hannah was her grandma's name. Hannah opened her eyes. The orchard was blurring. She let it blur. She kept me, Hannah said. She kept you. For almost 2 years. 2 years. Walter helped. She worked at the diner. Some old Mrs. Beckwith ran it. Then she was good to Maren. She let her bring you in a basket and set you behind the counter while she waitressed. But, Hannah, this is a small town. And in a small town in 1956, you couldn't be what Maren was without people knowing. And people did know. And people talked. And every Sunday morning, Maren sat alone in the pew at the Methodist, with you in her arms, and watched your daddy and Lorraine sit 4 rows up with their heads bent over the same hymnal. And she went home and she didn't say a word about it to Walter. And Walter didn't say a word about it to her. And it ate her, Hannah. It ate her like a thing eats a thing, from the inside. And then, one morning in February of 1958, when you were a little under 2 years old, Maren put on her good dress. And she packed you up in your warmest things. And she drove Walter's pickup into town. And she carried you up to your daddy's front porch. The porch of the house Lorraine's daddy had bought them. And she set you down on the doormat with a note pinned to your coat. And she rang the bell. And she got back in the truck and she drove away. What did the note say? I never read it. What do you think it said? Edith looked down at her hands. I think it said, you chose your family. Here. This is your family. Hannah pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. She didn't cry. The empty thing inside her was very full now. So full it hummed. But it did not cry. Where did she go? Hannah said. Chicago eventually. Walter heard from her a few times. Letters. She got work as a cook in a diner up there. She wrote that she was sorry. She wrote that she didn't know how to come back. She wrote that some nights she dreamed she was carrying you and woke up looking for you in the bed and didn't know where she was. Did she? Did she what, honey? Did she love me? Edith reached over. She put her hand on Hannah's knee, gently. She loved you so much it broke her sweetheart. Hannah let out a sound, a small one, not a sob. Something a step shy of a sob. The kind of sound a person makes when they have been told something they suspected was true and have spent 17 years pretending they didn't suspect. They sat together on the porch. The sun moved. The chickens scratched. Somewhere a tractor was working a field, a faint, faraway tractor putt-putting along the rim of the world. After a while, Hannah said, "My father died when I was 4. I know. Did he ever try to find her?" "I don't know, honey. I really don't. Your daddy and I, we weren't close after he married Lorraine. Nobody was. Lorraine kept him close to the house. He worked for her father at the hardware. He didn't come out this way much. And then the accident. The tractor. He was 26. He was 26. And then Lorraine kept me. And then Lorraine kept you. Did Marin know that he died?" "Yes." Edith hesitated. "I don't know. I don't think Walter told her. I think Walter was afraid she'd come back and try to take you. And Lorraine had legal claim to you by then. Your daddy had put you on his and Lorraine's papers when you were a few weeks old. Said you were theirs. To protect you from talk. I think Walter was afraid Marin coming back would just be one more way for her to be hurt. So she might not know. She might not know." Hannah looked at the orchard, the apple tree where the key had been, the pear trees behind it, the cherry on its own at the end. "She might not know my father is dead. That's right. She might not know I'm 17. That's right. She might not know I'm here." Edith looked at her. Edith Brennan looked at the girl on the porch step, and she said very quietly, "No, honey. She doesn't know you're here." The two of them sat there a long time after that. Edith stayed for supper. Hannah hadn't asked her to. Edith just stayed. She got up after a while and walked into Hannah's kitchen the way she'd done it 100 times before, though she'd never set foot in this kitchen in her life. And she opened the basket she'd left yesterday and she warmed the chicken and dumplings on the wood stove. She set out 2 plates. She found 2 forks. She wiped the lace cloth on the dining table with a damp rag. She turned a wildflower in a glass jar from the porch, a sprig of black-eyed Susan Hannah had cut that morning into a centerpiece. She moved around the kitchen of a dead man's daughter, as if she belonged there. And in a way, Hannah was beginning to understand she did. They ate. Hannah ate more than she'd expected. The dumplings were good. The chicken was real chicken slow-cooked, the kind that fell apart on your fork. Edith watched her eat with the satisfaction of a woman who has spent her life feeding people who needed feeding. After supper, they sat in the front room. Edith took the rocker. Hannah took the floor in front of the fireplace, even though there was no fire. The lamp between them. The light low. The house quieter now. The way old houses are quieter when there is a second person inside them. "Tell me about Walter," Hannah said. Edith rocked. "He was a good man." "You said." "He was." "How did he die?" "In his bed. Quietly. We found him 2 days after old Hank noticed the chimney hadn't smoked. Came down and looked. He'd just gone in his sleep, Hannah. He looked peaceful. 2 days alone. 2 days alone. That's not right." "No, it isn't. I'll never forgive myself for that. I'd seen him at the post office that Friday. He was tired. I should have come by Saturday. I had a peach pie I'd been meaning to bring. I didn't bring it. And he went on Saturday night, the doctor said. And I just didn't bring the pie. That's not your fault. It feels like my fault. It isn't." "I know," Edith said. "It still feels like it." They sat. A board creaked somewhere above them. The house settling. Friendly. Just the bones turning over. "Did he ever try to find her?" Hannah said. "Toward the end." Edith looked at the lamp. "I think he hoped she'd come on her own. I think he kept that room the way he kept it because he believed she'd walk back through that door one day. And he wanted her things to be where she'd left them. He wanted her to know nothing had been disturbed. He wanted her to know she could come home. And she didn't. She didn't. He died waiting. He died waiting." Hannah looked at her hands. "I'm 17, she said. "Yes. I have a mother who's alive." Edith was very still. "Yes, honey. I have a mother who's alive somewhere. Yes. Who I have never met. Yes. Whose father just died without knowing I was anywhere." Edith reached out and took Hannah's hand, and Hannah let her. "He knew, honey." "What?" "Walter knew. Walter always knew. He just didn't know where to find you. Lorraine wouldn't have let him near you. He used to drive past the schoolyard sometimes. Henry the postman told me that. He'd drive into town on a Wednesday morning when school let out for lunch, and he'd park his pickup across the street from the elementary, and he'd just sit there and watch the girls come out, looking for the one that looked like Marin." Hannah closed her hand around Edith's. "He saw me. I think he saw you. And he never came up. He didn't think he had the right." Hannah did cry then. A little. Not a flood. Just a slow leak of 2 tears down her face that she didn't bother to wipe. Edith didn't say anything. Edith just held her hand. Edith was a woman who had spent her life understanding when to talk and when not to, and she did not waste words on a moment that didn't need them. After a while, Hannah said, "I want to find her." "I know you do. Will you help me?" "I will." "Where do I start?" Edith squeezed Hannah's hand, then let go. "I have a cousin," she said. "Cousin Linnea lives up in Davenport. She works the records desk at the county courthouse. She has friends in Chicago. She can pull a thing or two if I ask her. She owes me 3 favors she's never gonna pay back any other way. How long will that take?" "A few days, honey. Maybe a week." "All right." "In the meantime," Edith said, "you have things to do." "I do." "You have a place to put together?" Yes, you have to be ready when she comes. The word when sat between them. Not if, when. Hannah nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Edith stood up, brushed her dress down, took the empty plates into the kitchen and washed them in the pump water in the sink. Even though Hannah said she'd do it, Edith hummed while she washed. A hymn. Hannah didn't know it, but the tune was the kind of tune that filled the kitchen, the way her grandma's humming had filled it once a long time ago in a house Hannah barely remembered. It made the house feel less empty. When Edith left, the sun was going down for the second time on Hannah Galloway's life as the owner of the Mercer farmstead, and the orchard was throwing long blue shadows toward the porch, and the wisteria smelled the way it had smelled when Hannah had walked up the drive 2 days ago, only stronger now in the cool of the evening. Edith stopped at the gate. She turned back. Hannah. Yes. That door. Yes. It's open now. I know. Things are going to start happening fast. I know. You're not alone in this. You hear me? You are not alone in this. Whatever comes next. I hear you. All right then. Edith Brennan walked away up the road in the evening light, and Hannah stood at the gate watching her go. And from inside the house behind her, through the open front door, down the hallway through the open oak door. The girl's room was quiet. Hannah went back inside. She went down the hallway. She stepped into the room. She picked up the 4 photographs from the kitchen table. She'd carried them in there during supper, set them down without thinking, and she carried them back to the room where they belonged. She put them on the desk, in a row, the way somebody had meant them to be looked at. Walter on the porch, Marin in the orchard at 16, Silas and Marin laughing in this yard, the baby in the blanket, Hannah. Hannah sat down on the bed. She put her hand on the quilt, and she said out loud to nobody, to the 4 walls, to the photographs, to the woman somewhere in Chicago who had set her down on a doormat 17 years ago and gone away. All right. Just that. All right. She didn't close the door when she went out. She would never close it again. She slept that night in the small upstairs bedroom with the east window, and the moon came up over the cottonwoods and laid a long silver square across her bed, and she dreamed of an apple tree with a stone under it, and a woman in a calico dress standing on the porch of the diner in Chicago, looking out at the rain. And when Hannah woke up at 5 in the morning, the dream did not let her go right away. She lay in the silver square and watched the moon move. And she thought, I have a name. I have a mother. I have a house. I have a story. And she thought, very small, very deep in the part of her that had been empty so long she'd forgotten she had it, I am not the spot on the plate. I never was. The week that followed was a long week. Hannah worked. The work helped. The work was the only thing that helped. She mended the section of fence she'd started before the storm. She climbed up onto the porch roof with old Hank, who had heard there was a girl on the Mercer place from Earl, and had come over without being asked. And the 2 of them patched the worst hole with a sheet of tin Hank had pulled out of his own barn that morning. He wouldn't take payment. He took 2 eggs. She cleaned the kitchen down to the floorboards. She washed the quilt from the small room in the washtub on the back porch and hung it on the line. She watched it dry. She didn't go into the small room every day, but she did go in. She'd sit on the bed. She'd open the yearbook. Hawkeye Consolidated Class of 1955. She'd find the page with Marin on it. Marin Mercer. Glee Club. 4-H. Smiling eyes, gentle ways, off to make her meek. And next to her, 3 rows up the same page, Silas Galloway. Track. FFA. Quiet as a hawk and twice as sharp. She'd close the yearbook. She'd open the letters tied with the ribbon. She'd read them slow. The letters were from Marin to Walter. 6 years' worth. Postmarked Chicago. Some short. Daddy, I am, well, the rent is paid. The cold here is something else, I love you, Em. Some long pages of cramped handwriting about a city Hannah had only ever seen in photographs in Life magazine. The L train. The cold off the lake. The way the snow turned black at the curbs by January. The diner she worked at Trudy's on Cermak, 12 hours a day. My feet feel like fence posts, but the tips are decent. The roommate she had. Annette, a Polish girl, very kind, sings in the kitchen. The loneliness she didn't name, but that bled through every line. In one letter dated 1962, 6 years after she left, Marin wrote, Daddy, the girl would be 6 now. I think about her every day. Don't tell me about her. I can't bear it. But I think about her. Please don't tell me. In another dated 1969, Daddy, I had a dream about Mama last night. She was standing in the kitchen by the wood stove. She was looking for something. I knew in the dream what she was looking for, but I couldn't say it. I woke up and I couldn't breathe. I am writing this at 4 in the morning. Don't worry. I am all right. I am always all right. I just need to say her name to somebody who knew her. Mama. Mama. There. M. Hannah read these by lamplight. She read them at the kitchen table. She read them sitting in the rocker by the window of the small room. She didn't cry over them. The empty thing in her chest was less empty every day, but it was not yet the kind of full that cried. That would come. On the 7th day, the next Wednesday after the Wednesday, Hannah had bought the farm. Edith came back up the track, walking fast, not running. Edith Brennan was not a woman who ran, but walking with the kind of purpose that was the closest a 40-year-old farmer's wife came to running. She had a piece of paper in her hand. Hannah was in the yard, hanging laundry. She turned. Edith stopped at the gate. She held up the paper. Cousin Linnea came through. Where? Chicago. Cermak Road still. Same neighborhood. She works at a diner there, Vincenzo's now, not Trudy's. Trudy's closed in '68. But she's there. She's still there. She's alive. She's alive. You have a number. I have a number. Hannah set down the basket of wet laundry. She crossed the yard. She took the paper. She looked at the number on it. 10 digits. A 312 area code. The exchange and the 4 numbers after, written in Edith's neat schoolteacher hand. She looked up at Edith. Edith looked back. The two of them stood on either side of the gate as the wind moved through the cottonwoods. "Earl has the phone," Edith said. "I know. It's the only one in 5 miles. He'll let you use it. I know. You don't have to do it today. I know. You can wait until you're ready." Hannah folded the paper. She slid it into her pocket, the same pocket that had held the letter and the key, the pocket that had become somehow in the last week the place where her whole life lived. She looked at Edith. "I'm ready now." Edith nodded. She held out her hand. Hannah took it, and together the 17-year-old girl who had bought a farm for $40 and the woman who had walked half a mile in a thunderstorm to bring her a rosary, they walked down the track past the gate out onto the gravel road and turned left, toward town, toward Earl's general store, toward the only telephone in 5 miles, toward Chicago, toward Cermak Road, toward a woman named Marin Mercer, who was at that exact moment somewhere in the middle of her shift at Vincenzo's diner, wiping down a counter and not yet knowing that 17 years of silence was about to end. The bell over Earl's door jingled. Earl looked up from his inventory sheet. He took one look at Hannah Galloway's face, took one look at Edith Brennan's, and he set the pencil down, slid off the stool, walked around the counter. "Back room," he said. "Earl Ipa's for back room. There's a stool, there's a glass of water. The phone's on the wall. I'll lock the front." He didn't ask why. Earl Hodges had stood behind that counter for 41 years. He knew the look of a person about to do a hard thing. He knew it the way a farmer knows weather. He took Hannah by the elbow, gentle, like he was helping his own grandmother across ice. He walked her past the dry goods, past the seed bins, past the rack of seed catalogs, and the cabinet of cough drops and bag balm and Watkins liniment, into the back room where he kept the books and the safe, and the old church pew he used as a settee. The phone was on the wall, black, heavy, the kind with the long curly cord and the rotary dial that took half a minute to wind through 10 digits. Earl pulled the stool over. "Glass of water's right there. Edith, you stay with her or you wait out front." "I'll wait out front." Hannah started. "Honey, you don't want a witness to this. You want it just you. Trust me." Edith squeezed Hannah's hand. Edith walked out. Earl looked at Hannah. "You take all the time you need," he said. "Anybody comes to the door, they can come back tomorrow." He went out. He closed the door behind him. Hannah was alone with the phone. She sat on the stool. She took the folded paper out of her pocket, smoothed it flat on her knee, looked at the 10 digits. She picked up the receiver. She put it back down. She picked it up again. She put it down. She thought, what am I going to say? She thought, I don't know what to say. She thought, hello, you're my mother. Hello, you left me. Hello, your father just died alone. Hello, I bought your house for $40. She thought, no, none of those. She thought, just dial. She picked up the receiver. The dial tone was loud in her ear. She dialed the 1, the 3, the 1. Her finger went slow around the wheel ticked back. She dialed the 2. She paused. She dialed the rest. The line clicked, clicked again, clicked a third time the way long-distance lines did in 1973, when they had to route the call through 3 different exchanges to find the one you wanted. Then it rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Hannah's heart was going so hard, she could feel it in her teeth. 4 times. A voice picked up. Vincenzo's. A man's voice. Heavy. Tired. Italian accent worn down by 30 years in Chicago. Hannah forgot how to talk. "Hello," the man said. I'm calling for Marin." "Marin who?" "Marin Mercer." A pause. "Marin Mercer, you mean Marnie?" "Yeah, hold on." The receiver clunked down on a hard surface. Far away on the other end of the line, Hannah could hear the diner. Plates being stacked. A grill hissing. Somebody laughing about something. A jukebox playing. Was that Patsy Cline? It was. Crazy. Faint. Tinny. Almost 1,000 miles away and into her ear through a wire. Footsteps. A woman's voice in the background. "Marnie, you got a call." A pause. Then footsteps coming closer. The receiver being picked up. Breath into the mouthpiece. And a woman's voice said, "This is Marnie." Hannah opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. She said, and she didn't know where the words came from. They came out before she chose them. They came out the way water comes out of a pump, when the handle's been waiting long enough. "I'm calling from the farm." A silence on the other end. A silence so complete that Hannah thought the line had gone dead. Then a small sound. A small broken sound. Not a word. The sound a person makes when they have stopped breathing without meaning to and have just now remembered to start again. "Which?" the woman said. "Which farm?" "The Mercer farm. Your father's farm." Another silence. Then the voice, different now, smaller, thinner. The voice of a woman who is sliding down a wall in a back hallway of a diner on Cermak Road and doesn't know yet that she's doing it. Who is this? Hannah looked at the wall. She looked at the calendar Earl had pinned up. July 1973. Hodges General Store. Where friends meet. She said, "My name is Hannah Galloway." The line went so quiet, Hannah could hear the long-distance hum behind it. Then she heard the woman start to cry. Not loud. Quiet. The way a person cries who has been holding a thing inside her body for 17 years and has just been given permission by a single sentence over a wire to set it down. "Oh," the woman said. Just that. "Oh." Hannah closed her eyes. The empty thing in her chest filled up. All the way up. To the brim. "You're 17, the woman said. "Yes." "You're 17 years old." "Yes." "Are you all right?" Hannah laughed. She didn't know why. It just came out. Wet and small. "I'm all right." "You're at the farm." "I'm at Earl's, on his phone. But I live at the farm now." "You live—" "I bought it from the county a week ago. It's a long story." "You bought my father's farm?" "Yes." "With what?" with $40. A sound on the other end. Half a laugh, half a sob. The sound of a woman who has been told the most impossible thing she will ever hear and has decided to believe it. "My father is dead," the woman said. It wasn't a question. Yes. How long? 3 years. A long breath. I knew. You knew. I came 3 years ago. I came on the bus. I got to town. I went to the diner. Mrs. Beckwith's daughter was running it by then. She told me. He'd been gone a week. I couldn't get out of the chair. I sat in that booth for 2 hours. And then I got back on the bus. I went back to Chicago. You came. I came. You came back. I came back, Hannah. I came back. I was too late, but I came back. Hannah put her forehead against the wall. She didn't say anything for a minute. Marin Marnie. Marin didn't say anything either. The two of them just breathed at each other across 900 miles of telephone wire. And it was the loudest silence Hannah had ever sat inside. Then Marin said, "Tell me what you look like." Hannah laughed. Wet again. I'm tall. Sort of. I have brown hair. It's longer than it should be. I have my daddy's chin. You have your daddy's chin. That's what people say. A pause. You have my hands. What? You have my hands. I'd bet money. The Mercer hands. Long fingers. A knuckle that goes up too high on the pointer. Hannah looked at her hand on the receiver. Her pointer finger. The knuckle that went up too high. The one Lorraine used to call ugly. The one Lorraine used to say made her hand look like a man's. Yes, Hannah said. I have your hands. Marin cried again. Quiet. For longer this time. Hannah let her. The line hummed. Patsy Cline finished on the jukebox 1,000 miles away. Something else came on. Hannah couldn't tell what. Hannah, yes. I don't know what to say to you. I know. I have practiced this conversation in my head for 17 years, and I do not know what to say to you. I know. I am sorry. I know. You don't have to say you forgive me. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am telling you I am sorry. There's a difference. I know there's a difference. All right. All right. Hannah. Yes. Why did you call? Hannah thought about that. She thought about it for a real second. Not the kind of second where you already know the answer and are just letting it sound considered. The kind of second where you have to find it. Because there is a room in your father's house, she said, and the door was locked. And I found the key. And I opened it. And I saw who you were. And I wanted to know. Wanted to know what? Why you left me. Oh, Hannah. And I want to know if you'd come back to see it, to see the farm, to see what's left of him, to see me. If you could stand it. If you would. The silence on the other end this time was different. It was the silence of a person making a decision. Yes, Marin said. Yes, I will come. When? I have to give notice. I have to pack. I have rent. Give me a month. A month? Or sooner. Sooner if I can. All right. Hannah. Yes. Don't change anything. What? In the house. The room. Don't change anything. Leave it. Just leave it the way it is until I get there. I will. All right. All right. All right, my girl. Hannah closed her eyes. My girl. She had not in 17 years on the earth been called my girl. Not once. All right, Hannah said. They hung up. She sat on the stool in Earl's back room with her hand on the receiver, and she didn't move for a long time. She didn't cry. The empty thing in her chest was so full, it had gone past needing to spill. It was just sitting there, inside her now. Warm, heavy, hers. When she came out of the back room, Earl was at the counter and Edith was in the rocker by the door, and they both looked up at her at the same time, and neither one of them asked. She's coming, Hannah said. Edith stood up. Edith crossed the floor. Edith took Hannah Galloway in her arms and held her. And Hannah, who had not been held in 17 years by a woman who meant it, stood there and let herself be held. Earl turned around so he wouldn't watch. He polished a jar of pickles that didn't need polishing. He polished it for a long, long time. The next 2 weeks were the strangest 2 weeks of Hannah's life. Because she had a thing to wait for now. And waiting changes a person. She kept her promise. She didn't change anything in the small room. She'd go into dust. She'd straighten the quilt. She'd open the curtain in the morning and close it again at night, just to keep the sun off the paper of the photographs. But she didn't move a single object. The pencil stayed in the cup. The blue ribbon stayed pinned to the wall. The yearbook stayed on the shelf next to Little Women the way Marin had set it there when she was 18 years old and didn't know yet that she wasn't coming back. Everywhere else Hannah worked. She and old Hank finished the porch roof. She and Edith mended the hen house, and Edith brought over 2 more hens. Because 7 is an unlucky number, honey, and I had 2 pullets that needed a new home anyway. Hannah named all 9 of them now. The Rhode Island Red was Beatrice. There was a barred Plymouth Rock named Frances. A buff Orpington named Junie. A scruffy little bantam she called Pip. She started a real garden. Edith brought tomato plants in coffee cans. Sweet pepper starts, a row of pole beans. They worked the soil together one Saturday morning side by side, on their knees in the dirt, the way Hannah supposed her mother had once worked it with Walter, when she was 12 years old. And the sun was the same sun, and the dirt was the same dirt. She learned things. She learned the wood stove. She learned to bank a fire so it would still be warm in the morning. She learned to pull water from the pump in a rhythm that didn't tire her arms out. She learned which hen laid the brown eggs and which one laid the cream. She learned that the Rhode Island Red would peck your ankle if you stepped between her and her food, and that the Plymouth Rock would let you pick her up and carry her around if you were patient. She learned to bake bread. That was the hardest one. The first loaf was a brick. She didn't know what she'd done wrong. The second one was a brick with a hollow inside it, somehow worse than the first. The third one came out flat as a frisbee. She stood in the kitchen with that third loaf on a cutting board, and she looked at it and she said out loud to the loaf, "You can't do this to me." And the loaf did not answer. Edith laughed when she heard about it. "Cookbook on the shelf in the small room," Edith said. "Did you look?" Hannah hadn't. She went and looked. It was there. The settlement cookbook. The cover green and worn. Marin's name written inside the front cover. In a 15-year-old's loopy script. Marin E. Mercer, 1953. The bread page had been used so many times the corner was gray. Hannah sat at the kitchen table and read the recipe slow. She wrote down the steps in her spiral notebook. She measured carefully. She kneaded the way the book said to knead, until the dough was smooth as a baby's cheek, the book said. Which Hannah thought was a strange thing to write in a book, but also a thing she now knew after the fact was exactly the right description. The fourth loaf came out tall and brown, and just a little crooked on one side. Hannah set it on the cooling rack on the windowsill. She looked at it. She started laughing, because it was the most beautiful crooked loaf of bread she had ever seen in her life. She cut a slice while it was still warm. She slathered it with butter she'd churned that morning in a mason jar Edith had taught her, and she ate it standing at the window, looking out at the orchard, and it was the best thing she'd ever eaten. And she thought, wait till she sees this. Wait till my mother sees this. She went to church with Edith that Sunday. She'd never been to church. Lorraine had not been a church-going woman. Lorraine had been a went when people were watching woman, which was different. Hannah had been to weddings and funerals. She had never been to a Sunday service. Edith picked her up in the Brennan's Chevy pickup at 9:30. Hannah wore the only dress she owned that didn't have a stain on it. A green cotton shirtwaist she'd had since the 8th grade, and that hit her now an inch above the knee, which she suspected was scandalous but had no way to ask about. Edith looked at her in the truck and didn't say anything about the dress. Edith just patted her knee and said, "You look real nice, honey." And Hannah understood that Edith was the kind of woman who would never make a person feel bad about a dress. The church was a whiteboard building with a steeple set back from the road in a grove of oaks. Methodist. Established 1879 according to the sign. 40 cars in the gravel lot. Edith parked at the back. Hannah walked in beside her. Heads turned, not unkindly, just curious, the way heads turn in a small Iowa church when a new face appears in the pew. Eyes finding her, eyes finding Edith, eyes adding things up, eyes putting the pieces together. The Galloway girl, out at the Mercer place, with Edith Brennan. Well, well, well. Hannah felt the eyes. Hannah did not look away. She sat next to Edith in the third pew from the back. She stood when Edith stood. She sat when Edith sat. She held the hymnal Edith handed her, and she found her place by following Edith's finger. And when the congregation sang, she didn't sing. She didn't know the songs, but she listened. The hymn was in the garden. I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses. A woman 2 pews up sang the high harmony. A man somewhere behind them had a bass voice that vibrated in Hannah's sternum. Edith hummed, didn't quite sing, but hummed. Hannah looked at her own hands holding the hymnal. Her mother's hands. The knuckle that went up too high. And in the quiet of that white-walled country church with the sun coming in through the south window, and lighting up the dust in the air. And a woman 2 pews up singing the harmony Hannah Galloway thought, I am part of something. I have been part of something my whole life, and didn't know it. She didn't cry. The empty thing in her chest stayed full and warm. But she came close. After the service, the preacher's wife, a tall woman named Mrs. Halverson with reading glasses on a chain, came over to introduce herself, and Edith introduced Hannah, and Mrs. Halverson took Hannah's hand in both of hers and said, We are so glad to have you, honey. You come back next Sunday now, and meant it. Edith drove her home. She left the truck running at the gate. Thank you, Hannah said. For what? For all of it. Edith looked at her. Honey, she said, it's not a favor. It's just what people do. She drove off. Hannah stood at the gate and watched the dust settle and thought, no, it's not just what people do. It's what some people do. And I have spent 17 years with people who didn't. She walked up to her house. She made herself a cup of coffee. She sat on the porch, and she watched a hawk turn slow circles over the corn. The letter came on a Tuesday. It wasn't from Marin. It was from Lorraine. Earl drove it out himself. He pulled up to the gate in his truck around 4 in the afternoon. Hannah was hauling water from the pump to the garden. She set the bucket down. She walked over. Earl was holding a plain white envelope. His face was the face of a man delivering news he didn't want to deliver. Brought this by hand, he said. Postman gave it to me at the store this morning. I figured. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The handwriting on the envelope was Lorraine Galloway's. Hannah looked at it. She looked at Earl. Thank you, she said. You don't have to read it today. I know. You don't have to read it ever. I know. I'll wait at the gate. You want me to? Earl. No, thank you. I'm all right. He drove off. Hannah carried the envelope back up to the porch. She sat down in the rocker. She held the envelope on her lap for a long time before she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of folded paper. Lorraine's handwriting, spidery. The kind of handwriting that pretended to be cultured and almost made it. Hannah, I need to come and see you. There are things I need to say. I don't expect you to want to see me. I don't expect anything. But I am asking. Wednesday afternoon. If you don't write back to say no, I'll come. L. Hannah read it. Hannah read it again. She did not write back to say no. She did not write back at all. She just folded the letter, put it inside the spiral notebook, closed the notebook, set it on the porch rail, and went back to the pump. Wednesday came. Lorraine's car came up the track at 2 o'clock. Hannah heard it before she saw it. The Buick's engine. The same one Lorraine had been driving for 9 years. Lorraine never bought a new car. Lorraine bought one car and held onto it the way she held onto a grudge. Hannah was in the kitchen. She was kneading dough. She didn't go out to meet the car. She heard the engine cut. She heard the door open, close. She heard footsteps on the gravel. Slow. Slower than Lorraine usually walked. The footsteps came up the porch. There was a pause. Then a knock. Hannah set the dough down. She wiped her hands on the apron Edith had given her. She walked into the front room. Through the screen door, she could see Lorraine. Lorraine was different. She wasn't done up the way she'd always been done up. The hair wasn't perfectly set. The lipstick wasn't on. She was wearing a plain navy dress and flat shoes, and she had a wooden box in her hands about the size of a shoebox with a lid. She looked smaller than Hannah remembered. Smaller. And older and tired in a way Hannah had never seen her tired. Hannah opened the screen door. She did not invite Lorraine in. Lorraine did not ask to come in. Lorraine stood on the porch and held the wooden box and looked at Hannah. And her face did a thing Hannah had never seen Lorraine's face do. It cracked. Not all at once. Just at the corners. "Hannah," Lorraine said. "Lorraine, may I? You can sit on the step." "All right." Lorraine sat on the top step of the porch, knees together, the wooden box on her lap, her hands folded over the lid. She didn't look at Hannah for a long second. Hannah sat down too, on the rocker, a few feet away, not close enough to touch, close enough to hear. The yard was quiet. The chickens scratched. A grasshopper jumped from one fence post to another. "I don't deserve to be here," Lorraine said. Hannah didn't answer. I'm not asking to be here. I came to give you this and to say some things, and then I'll go. You don't have to say anything back. You don't even have to listen if you don't want to. You can get up and walk away, and I'll set the box down, and I'll go. I'll listen." Lorraine looked up. She looked at Hannah. The cracks at the corners of her face got wider. "All right," she said. "All right. Thank you." She put a hand on the box. She started. "Your father didn't love me." It wasn't what Hannah was expecting. It wasn't what she was expecting at all. Lorraine kept going. "He married me. He was kind to me. He provided for me. He never raised his hand to me. He never raised his voice. He was a good husband in every way that a man can be a good husband, except the one that mattered. He didn't love me. He loved her. He always loved her. And I knew it the whole time." Hannah was very still. "I knew it the night of our wedding. I knew it the morning after. I knew it every Sunday at church when she sat in the back row with you in her arms. And he wouldn't look at her and she wouldn't look at him. And the whole back of my neck was on fire. Because everybody in that church knew it too. I knew it every time he came home late from the store and I asked where he'd been and he said just driving. And I knew he had driven past her father's farm on the gravel road. Just driven past just to look at the lights in the windows." Lorraine's hands were tight on the box. "And then she left. And then she left. And she left you. She left me. On our doorstep. On our doorstep. And Lorraine stopped. She took a breath. "And I should have loved you. I should have. You were a baby. You didn't choose any of it. You didn't choose to be born. You didn't choose to be left. You didn't choose to look exactly like her. You didn't choose any of it. And I should have looked at you and seen a child who needed loving, and I should have loved you. That was the only right thing to do. That was the only thing. She stopped. She closed her eyes. But every time I looked at you, I saw her. Hannah didn't move. Every time, every single time. For 13 years, I saw her. In your eyes. In the way you held a fork. In your hair when it was wet. In the way you stood at the screen door looking out at the rain when you were 6 years old. I saw her and I could not. I could not get past it. I tried. Hannah, I want you to know. I tried. But it was like she was in the house, and he was in the house, and the two of them were in there with me always. And I was the third one. I was the third one in my own marriage, and then I was the third one in my own home with a child who wasn't mine. She opened her eyes. She looked at Hannah. That is not an excuse, she said. That is an explanation. There is a difference. I want you to know there is a difference. I am not asking you to forgive me. I have not earned forgiveness, and I am not going to pretend I have. I am telling you why. Because you deserve to know why. Hannah looked at her hands. Her mother's hands. The knuckle that went up too high. The hands Lorraine had once told her were ugly. You took it out on me, Hannah said. Yes. For 13 years. Yes. I was a child. You were a child. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. It was never one single thing your fault. You threw me out over a plate. I threw you out over a plate. Yes, I think I had been looking for a reason for 13 years. Any reason. I think I was so afraid you'd grow up and become her and leave me too that I tried to make you leave first, before you could choose to. Hannah felt the corner of her mouth do something that wasn't a smile. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, she said. Lorraine nodded. Slow. I know. And it's no excuse. I know. And I don't know what to do with it. I know. The two of them sat on the porch and the chicken scratched. After a while, Lorraine slid the wooden box across the porch boards toward Hannah. What is it? Open it. Hannah opened it. Inside the box, letters. 40, maybe 50 letters. Tied in 3 bundles with white string. The handwriting on the top one was the same handwriting Hannah had seen in Marin's letters to Walter. The slanted, careful schoolgirl hand. Hannah looked up. These are her letters to him. To your daddy. She wrote them after she left. After you. She wrote dozens of them. Some of them have stamps. Some of them don't. Some of them she sent. Some of them I think she wrote and never sent. I don't know how she got the unsent ones to him. Maybe she gave them to Walter and Walter gave them to your daddy. I don't know. I found them after your daddy died. In the bottom of his toolbox. I have had them for 13 years. You read them. I read them. Every one. Twice. 3 times. I've read them more times than I can count. Why? Because I was punishing myself. and because some part of me wanted to know what he had felt, what she had felt, what I wasn't. You kept them from me. I kept them from you. For 13 years. For 13 years. I had a right to these. You had a right to these. I am bringing them now because I heard from Earl that you've been making a home out here. And I heard from somebody at church that Edith Brennan has been seen up at the Mercer place. And I knew the moment Earl told me you'd bought it. I knew you would find out. I knew you'd find her, and I thought at least let me give her this. At least let me put this in her hands before she has to ask for it. Hannah ran her thumb along the top bundle. The string was yellowed. You should have given me these years ago. Yes. You should have told me about her years ago. Yes. Do you understand what you did? Yes. Do you? Hannah, I have understood it for years. I've understood it every day. I've understood it every time I looked at you and pretended I hadn't. I am asking you to understand that understanding it did not make me able to fix it. That's the thing nobody tells you about being wrong. Sometimes you know you're wrong, and you cannot by yourself stop being wrong. I needed help. I never asked for help. There is nobody to blame for that but me. Hannah closed the box. She set it down on the porch. She looked out at the orchard. The wind was moving in the leaves. The apple tree where the key had been was just a green shape against the blue. Lorraine, yes, I am not going to forgive you today. I am not asking you to. I might forgive you someday. I don't know. That is more than I came expecting. But I want you to know something. Yes, I would not have grown up to leave you. Lorraine put her hand to her mouth. I would not have, Hannah said. I would have stayed. I would have been a good daughter. I would have been your daughter. If you had let me. Lorraine made a sound. A small, wrecked sound. She stood up. She turned away from Hannah. She walked to the porch railing and put both hands on it, and bent her head, and her shoulders moved up and down for a minute, and Hannah did not get up. Hannah did not go to her. Hannah sat in the rocker and watched. After a minute, Lorraine straightened. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. She turned back. I'm going to go now. All right. Can I come back sometime? Not soon, not to push, just sometime. Hannah considered. She did not answer right away. She thought about a girl on a doormat in February. She thought about 13 years of plates with no spots. She thought about a woman in a navy dress who had carried a box of letters across a porch. Write to me first, Hannah said. Don't just come. I'll write. All right. All right. Lorraine walked down the porch steps. She stopped at the bottom. She turned. Hannah. Yes. She was a good girl. Marin. She was a good girl. I never said that out loud in 17 years. I'm saying it now. I am saying it where she can't hear it, but I am saying it. She was a good girl, and your daddy never deserved her. And neither did I. Hannah didn't answer. She didn't trust her voice. Lorraine walked to her car. She got in. She drove away. The dust on the track settled. The chickens scratched. Hannah sat on the porch and looked at the wooden box for a long, long time. And then she opened it, and she read the letters. She read them all. She started just after supper, and she didn't stop until the moon was up over the cottonwoods and the lamp on the kitchen table had been refilled twice. She read the ones with stamps and the ones without. She read the ones Marin had written 6 months after leaving Silas. I do not know how I will live with this. And the ones from 2 years later, Silas. She would be walking now. Isn't that strange to think? And the ones from 6 years out. Silas, I dreamed about you last night. And I woke up and I was so angry. I have been so angry at you for so long. I do not know what to do with this anger. I do not know where to put it down. She read the last one, dated September 1960, 5 months after Silas Galloway died in a tractor accident in a back pasture in Iowa. A letter Marin had written not knowing he was dead. Silas, I'm thinking about coming back. Not to take her, not to undo any of it, just to see her once, from across a street maybe. I would not even need to talk to her. I would just need to know she is real. I would just need to lay eyes on her one time. Tell me if I can. Tell me if she would be all right. M. There was no answer to that letter. He hadn't been alive to answer it. Hannah folded it. She put it on top of the stack. She turned the lamp down, and she sat in the kitchen of her house, and she said out loud, in a voice that was steady, because steady was the only voice she had left. She's coming. I'm going to tell her. She's coming, and I'm going to tell her every word he didn't get to. She thought she was done crying. She wasn't. She put her head down on the table and she cried, really cried the empty thing in her chest, spilling over for the first time in 17 years. The dam giving and the lamp burned low, and the chickens slept. And outside the cottonwoods bent in a soft wind from the south, and the moon kept on moving. 2 weeks later, Lorraine wrote, Hannah, may I come Sunday after church? I would like to bring you a thing of your father's. I will not stay long. L. Hannah wrote back, all right. Lorraine came. Lorraine brought a sealed envelope. She handed it to Hannah on the porch and did not sit down this time. Your father wrote this, Lorraine said. He wrote it the week before he died. I found it the same day I found the letters. I kept it. I kept it because I was so angry at him I could not bear to let anyone read what he had written. Especially you. I am giving it to you now because I am trying, Hannah. I am trying. She handed Hannah the envelope. She walked back to her car. She drove away. Hannah went inside. She sat at the kitchen table. She opened it. It was 3 pages. Her father's handwriting. The same handwriting from the back of the photographs. Pictures. Walter. May 1954. Marin. 16. Spring 1955. Silas and Marin. June 1955. She came. February 1956. Hannah, if you ever read this, I am sorry. I am sorry first before anything else. You are 4 years old today as I write this. You came in earlier and you climbed in my lap, and you asked me what I was doing, and I said, writing a letter, and you asked who to, and I said to a person who isn't here yet. You said that was silly. You said, how can you write a letter to a person who isn't here? And I said, sweet pea, sometimes you have to. Sometimes the only person you need to say a thing to is one you can't reach. I want to tell you about your mother. I want to tell you that her name was Marin, that she was the prettiest girl in the county when she was 16 years old, and she didn't know it, which was the prettiest thing about her. That she had a laugh that came up out of her like a creek coming up out of the ground. That she could pitch a softball over the fence behind the schoolhouse. That she could sing alto in church and the alto line was harder than the soprano. And she made it sound easy. I want to tell you I loved her. I want to tell you I was a coward. Lorraine's mother came to me in the spring of '55. She told me a great many things. Some of them were true. Most of them were lies. The truest one was that I was scared of being poor. And the scaredness in me was bigger than the love. I want you to know I have not forgiven myself for that. And I won't because I don't deserve to. I am writing this anyway because if I do not write it down somewhere, you will never know there was a man who chose wrong. And that man was your father. And you came out of that wrong choice. And you are the only good thing that came out of any of it. Your mother is alive somewhere. I have not seen her in 3 years. I do not know where she is. I hope someday you will know. I hope someday she will come and look at you and say to you all the things I cannot say. I'm also writing to ask you something. It is a hard thing to ask of a 4-year-old who will be older when she reads this, if she reads this. So I will say it once and not say it again. Hannah, do not let me be the reason you do not trust love. I was bad at it. I was a coward at it. I hurt 3 women, your mother, Lorraine, and you by being bad at it. But love is real. Love is the realest thing there is. It is the only thing worth being brave for. And if you grow up and you find somebody who is the right person, do not do what I did. Do not listen to the voice that says you cannot afford it. Do not listen to a woman in a Buick who tells you your future is in town. Do not listen to the part of yourself that is afraid. Listen to the part of yourself that knows. Be braver than I was, sweet pea. That is the only thing I have to leave you. Your father, Silas. Hannah read it twice. She folded it. She put it in the spiral notebook with everything else. She sat at the table for a long time. Then she got up. She walked into the front room. She picked up the photograph of her father, the one Lorraine kept on the bookshelf. The one Hannah had taken with her in the bottom of her suitcase when Lorraine threw her out. The only thing of his she'd thought to grab, and she looked at it. She looked at it the way she had not been able to look at it for 13 years. Because Lorraine had stood between Hannah and that face for 13 years like a curtain. She didn't say, I forgive you. She wasn't sure yet whether she did. She did say very quietly to the photograph, I hear you, Daddy. She set the photograph back on the shelf. She turned the lamp down. She went to bed. The bus from Chicago pulled into the town square at 4:14 in the afternoon on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. It was an ordinary Greyhound, silver, dusty from the road. The driver opened the door and folks got off. A young man with a duffel bag, a woman with 2 grandchildren in matching coats, an old man with a cane, and then a woman. 39 years old, hair pulled back in a low knot, a brown wool coat that had seen better decades, a suitcase in one hand square and battered with a fading sticker on the side that said, Trudy's 1962, and in the other hand, a small cloth bag with a drawstring. She stepped off the bus. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment. She looked around the town square, the same square she had not stood in for 17 years. She breathed in. She breathed out. She started walking. Hannah was on the porch. She'd been on the porch all afternoon. She'd put on the dress Edith had helped her sew, a simple cream-colored cotton dress with a soft collar made from yardage Edith had given her, sewed on the singer in the front room that Walter had kept polished for 30 years. She'd put her hair up the way Edith showed her. She'd made bread. The bread was on the table inside on a cooling rack. It was not crooked. It was tall. It was brown. It was almost embarrassingly perfect. The chickens had been fed. The fire was banked. The kettle was on for tea, and Hannah Galloway, 17 years old, sat on the top step of the porch. She had nearly let collapse and watched the gate. She had been watching the gate for an hour. It was 4:30 when she saw a figure walking up the gravel road. The figure paused at the gate. The figure set down a suitcase. The figure stood very still, the way Hannah had stood very still the first time she had walked up this drive. And the figure looked at the house, at the wisteria, at the porch, at the chickens scratching in the yard, at the orchard down the slope. Then the figure looked at the porch, and the figure saw Hannah. Hannah stood up, slow. She did not run. She did not move. She just stood. The figure picked up the suitcase. The figure pushed open the gate. The figure walked up the track toward the house, slow, like a person who had walked this path in her mind every night for 17 years and could not quite believe her feet were doing it now in daylight. When she got to the bottom of the porch steps, the woman stopped. She set down the suitcase. She held the cloth bag against her chest. She looked up at Hannah. Hannah looked down at her. The two of them did not say anything for a long moment. It was Maren who spoke first. "You grew up," she said. "You grew up just like me." Hannah's mouth did a thing. She tried to speak. It took her 2 tries. "My bread is still crooked," she said. Maren held up the cloth bag. "I brought sourdough starter," she said. "I came to fix it." Hannah laughed. It came out wet and small and not all the way under control. Maren laughed too. Then Hannah Galloway, 17 years old, walked down the porch steps in a cream cotton dress on a Wednesday afternoon in November of 1973, and her mother walked up. And they met in the middle of the steps. Maren set the bag down. Hannah opened her arms. And for the first time in her life, for the very first time in 17 years on this earth, Hannah Galloway was held by the woman whose hand she had inherited, whose knuckle went up too high on the pointer, whose laugh she had only ever read about in a letter dated 1962. They didn't say anything else for a while. They didn't have to. The chickens kept scratching. The wisteria moved in the soft November wind. The kettle in the kitchen started its slow whistle. And inside the house on the table was a loaf of bread that was tall and brown and not crooked at all. and there was a wooden box of letters on the sideboard, and a row of photographs on a desk, in a small room that hadn't been closed in months, and a quilt washed clean on the bed, and a cookbook open to the bread page. A house. A real house. A house with the door open. Maren pulled back. She put her hands on Hannah's face. She looked at her. She looked at her the way a person looks at a photograph she's been carrying in her pocket for 17 years and can finally lay flat on a table. "All right," Maren said. Hannah swallowed. "All right," she said. "Let's go inside." All right. Together, the woman who had left and the daughter who had been left. The cook from Chicago and the 17-year-old who had bought her own grandfather's farm for $40. The two pairs of Mercer hands that had not held each other since February of 1958. They walked up the porch steps. The screen door closed behind them with a soft slap. The kettle whistled. The chicken settled. The sun went down behind the cottonwoods, and inside the kitchen of the Mercer Galloway farmstead, a mother and a daughter stood at a wooden table where a tall brown loaf of bread was cooling, and the mother opened her bag of starter, and the daughter got down 2 cups for tea, and somewhere out in the orchard the wind moved in the apple trees where a key had once been buried. There was no music. There was no swelling. There was just a kitchen and bread and the long, quiet, ordinary beginning of a life that had been waiting on both sides of a long silence to begin. The kind of beginning that does not announce itself. The kind that simply starts and keeps going.